I just hope everybody in this room has a friend like I have with Rico. It is such a blessing. I'd like to introduce first my family and my kids. Jennifer and Tim are here, okay? Cynthia, Alan, and Callie is over here. Stand up, Callie. And Brad, Pam, and their two sons, our two young grandsons, Aiden and Reese. I might add that Pam is a Stanford graduate. In fact, she got her postdoc here, working with Bill Damon. Callie just spent a semester, she's at Oxy, about ready to graduate, and she's going to make the world a better place. She spent a semester, last semester, at the United Nations as an intern, and we're so proud of our whole family. The honor that is being bestowed on me is really my opportunity to say thank you to Stanford. Stanford has been so significant to us in our life. I would say, Dean, in reality, I'm not sure I should accept this honor. My thinking is that Dottie ought to get it. As Rico said, we've been married 55 plus years. Well, in June will be 56. And our marriage started in 58. We came out here, and the dean that came in maybe a month after we showed up was Ernie Arbuckle. And Dottie put me through school, and she worked in the placement office, basically in Ernie Arbuckle's office. And as far as I'm concerned, his deanship, Ernie Arbuckle's deanship, was really the inflection point where Stanford really started to rise, whereas today it is number one. So I must tell you that our lives have just been hugely impacted by the relationships that we have at Stanford University. Today, I'd like to thank John Hennessy, and I'd like to thank Dean Garcelona as they continue to make this place an amazing global leader. This evening, I'd like to focus on one thing, and that is we have been givers, and we want to share how giving has made our life more meaningful. We're the ones who have benefited by our giving, including the friendships we've developed right here at Stanford University. We are so blessed. With the thought that our experience in giving, in philanthropic giving, may stimulate your actions, and I really hope there are two things in my talk tonight. There are two things I'd like to have done. One is to make sure that Stanford knows how much we appreciate this place. And secondly, I'd like to see action take place. When I'm finished, I want to see action, okay? We have three guidelines that I'd like to talk about for our philanthropic giving, and I share them with the idea that maybe they'll be instrumental to your thinking about how you engage with your philanthropic activity. The guidelines that we have: 1, focus; 2, results; 3, collaboration. So let's start with focus. In 1995, I was standing in my driveway with John Gardner. I'm sure a number of you know who John Gardner was, former Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, amazing person, and spent the last years of his life right here at Stanford. John was also an Arbuckle awardee in 1993. So I was standing there talking to John, and I asked him for advice, and I will say, I think, frankly, it was advice that I can share and people can think about yourselves. The advice I asked was because we were about to start a family foundation. And I said, John, you've had all this experience in government and not-for-profit and business, and what advice would you give us to start a foundation? Well, I received some real wisdom from John Gardner. He looked at me and kind of a scowl on his face, and he said, focus. And from his background, that was the word we took to start Thrive Foundation for Youth. We got together, the 8 of us, our 3 kids, their spouses, Dottie and myself, and we came up with the name Thrive because what we were really interested in was positive youth development. I will say we did that before Kaiser did, so we got there first. 6 months ago, we hired a new CEO, Nicole Taylor. Nicole has both her undergraduate and master's degree from Stanford, so she's one of us. Our mission with Thrive Foundation is to basically help youth, disadvantaged youth, as Rico has said, and really we think about this as a pathway of development, and here's their potential, this is what the pathway they're on, and this is our space with Thrive. We want to close that gap and have kids with the support of caring adults, whether it's parent, teacher, coach, constellation of caring adults. How do we help these kids get on this full potential thriving pathway? But again, what we learned and what I offer as advice when you think about your philanthropy, focus. Another lesson that we've learned from our philanthropy, and in turn want to share with you, is to expect and require results. We're talking about real results. There are many well-meaning organizations who want to do things well, want to make the world a better place. But when you ask them, well, what are the results that you have achieved? Well, the answer kind of gets fuzzy. You know, you don't really hear the data that Bill would talk about in his class, which we admire so much. One way to think about the difference between sort of hoped for, expected, maybe results and actual results, if you think about Cal's football team. Janet, I'm sorry, Janet. So to continue thinking about results, I returned to 1973 when I established my investment business. In that beginning year, it was like driving up to the back of a dump truck. I mean, the markets were just in a tailspin. However, I had developed a strategy focusing on long-term fundamental change forces, political, social, economic, technological forces. And basically what we're trying to do is who's in the right business. So that actually worked out well for us as far as an investment approach. But going back even further, in 1961, I was just getting started in New York in the business. And I had the good fortune to meet and befriend Jack Trainer. I don't know if any of you know that name, but Jack was the editor of the Financial Analyst Journal. In one meeting, Jack made a statement. He said, and I remember nodding and saying, well, that makes sense. Then I went home that day and I started thinking about what he said really made a lot of sense. And it, in fact, became, again, like change, became a central factor in the way we thought about investing. The statement that Jack Trainer made was, the essence of investment is comparison. And if you stop and think about it, I decided to do this instead of that, or I had these opportunities and I did this. And if you really think about it, the essence of investment is comparison, you can really improve your results. And I think the way we did it, we had a limited number of securities in the portfolio. We would do our research. We found something that we really wanted to buy. We're not going to buy anything without selling something. And so the tension that put on the portfolio really led to very significant, thankfully, really good investment results. I really think you can apply the same thing to your philanthropic giving. If you do your homework and you're out looking for an area that you feel strongly about, you want to support, and you find a second organization or third, and then you start comparing them, well, who's really making a difference? Where are the real results taking place? So I think the combination of results that are absolutely required that this comparative process can lead you to have even better results with your philanthropic giving. I will confess one of the thoughts that we have had that philanthropy really takes to do it, money, time, and ideas that you create. And I'll confess that utilization or management of time is not the easiest thing for me. But time is, if it's well invested, I think can pay real results. And I'm going to flash back to when, in fact, we came back to the Bay Area after New York. And Rico's already, spilled the beans about how much huge amount of money that I was making at that time. Dottie came across a letter which I think adds a little color to our financial situation in 1960, having graduated. This is from Stanford University, this letter I'm holding, Stanford University, from the Office of Controller. Okay, September 16th, 1960. Dear Mr. King, thank you for your letter of September 10th, 1960, regarding your note which matured September 1, 1960. Your number 2 plan to repay your note with $25 plus interest monthly is very satisfactory. Interest to January 1st, 1961 will be $3.33. But again, coming back to the thought of managing time and where we started, Dottie was a volunteer at Allied Arts, the artisan shop restaurants that are right here in Menlo Park. Where's John and Tasha? Where are they? Thanks, John and Tasha, for their amazing support of Allied Arts. It's been terrific. This past summer, now I'm going to jump ahead to a real recent time, we got introduced to a couple, and they needed a place to stay. And the reason they needed a place to stay is they had a baby just delivered at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital here. Again, Allied Arts was set up, organized to support the hospital. The couple needed a place to stay, and they needed to be close by. Their baby, Abigail, was born at 2 pounds and no kidneys. 2 pounds and no kidneys. I mean, I don't know how you even think about it, but I'm convinced that Dottie made a sale when she was working at Allied Arts in the gift shop, and Stanford Management Company did a great job of managing that money. And that money was used to pay for the doctors who were working on Abigail. And there's no question in my mind that that time that Dottie invested saved Abigail's life. So time is significant, and I think you can think about real significant results. When we came back from New York, I'm going back to 1961, it was really Dottie's folks who had offered their home and hosted a Chinese student. This is in 1946 that she was doing that. We came back and said, we could take a page out of her folks' book and we could host international students. One of the recipients of the Arbuckle Award, I'm going to lose my place here, is Steve Bechtel. And Steve created the Bechtel Eye Center, Bechtel International Center. It was really through the Bechtel Eye Center that we got engaged hosting international students. I was telling Lord Brown earlier tonight that when the tsunami hit Japan, Dottie's on the phone to Sugiko. And she got off the phone and I said, honey, when did Sugiko come into her life? Well, she said, well, Jenny, our daughter, was in a playgroup with her when she was 1. I said, honey, Jenny's 51 years. Are you telling me that you've known Sugiko 50 years and you're picking up a phone, calling her in Tokyo? In any case, the whole relationship that we have had with international students has been phenomenal. When I think about from Estonia to India, from France to China, we've experienced the world in our own home right here. In fact, what I'd like to do at this moment is introduce Min Trey. Min? 21 years ago, Min came into our life. Min was the 23rd generation to be born in his village in Shandong province. Anybody else can trace their heritage back 23? In any case, he came to get a PhD in molecular biology at Stanford. And if you had visited his home like we had, I mean, it is out in the boondocks and dirt floors. And God bless Min, who has gone on to do wonderful things with his career. A second person I'd like to introduce is Andrietta Maforo. Andrietta? Andrietta grew up in a dirt-poor family in Zimbabwe. Somebody helped her to get into Grinnell College in Iowa. She was a Phi Beta Kappa, I might say. She worked for a couple of years, came to Stanford. We fell in love with Andrietta. I kind of think that when we went to Tunis, to Tunisia, to visit Andrietta after she graduated, she was working for the African Development Bank, and she invited Mr. Wright over from Kenya, Murefu, and I kind of think it was Andrietta's rationale that she wanted Dottie to check this guy out and approve of it. In any case, that, yeah, he was a Yale. In any case, Andrietta asked us to be part of her wedding in Lake Naivasha in Kenya, where she now lives, and we just are so blessed by having something like this in our life. So when I think about Min from China and I think about Andrietta from Zimbabwe, how rich our life has been. So I would say now, 50 years later, we have a very big international family, stretching really around the world. All of these international experiences are ones that we have Stanford to thank, and it is so significant in our life. When I think about it, those experiences really weave a fabric for our determination to contribute to solving the tragedy of extreme poverty. What we've done is establish the Stanford Institute for Innovation in Developing Economies. An easier way to say it is SEED. That's our nickname. And as the model has unfolded for SEED, we realize that our two major philanthropic activities, Thrive Foundation for Youth and the Stanford Institute, they really inform each other. In both cases, there's a fundamental notion of research, and that undergirds the effort. This research should inform the action in the field of practice. In SEED's case, what we refer to as on the ground, the Stanford Innovation Center in Accra, Ghana, serving Western Africa. That's where the practice is taking place. The design of this model is that research informs practice, but then there's an important feedback loop, and from practice back to research. And in both cases, in Thrive's case, we spent over 7 years doing social science research. Bill Damon, thank you, Bill, who is with us this evening, the director of the Stanford Center for Adolescence, was very much significant part of this activity of doing social science research. How do we think about thriving for a young person? And his development, Bill's development, when he came up with the notion of purpose, has become very significant in terms of one of our indicators of thriving. So as I continue to think about collaboration, which is really significant as a key element of success in philanthropy, I would like to share the saying that Garth has already used, which is significant to us, and that is walking together, walking far. Walking together, walking far. And for us, that, which is a well-used African saying, it really underscores the notion of collaboration, how you can do things together and go farther. So as I stand here tonight saying thank you to Stanford, I note that by teaming up with Stanford, we could do something we never could have done on our own. 2.5 years ago, we decided we want to do something meaningful about this issue of extreme poverty. We concluded that 1 billion people living on $1 and change per day, just plain wrong. It's just wrong. And when you think about today's technology, the internet, cell phones, this world has shrunk and continues to shrink. And the question of who is your neighbor, that's changed. As a point of reference, I was reminded the other day when I was telling a friend that Dottie and I in 1958 were to be married in Wisconsin with plans to come to Stanford. My father, was asked the question back then in 1958 whether he, from Boston, had ever been west before. He promptly said, "Oh yes, I've been to Cincinnati." Today we don't think twice of picking up the phone, talking to somebody in Nairobi or in Beijing. So when you think about the question, who is your neighbor, who is it that you're called to love? Our neighbors are around the world. Several years ago, we had the good fortune of getting to know Jim Kim. Jim was president of Dartmouth College. Jim's been to our home. We got really connected with him. Now, as most of you know, he's the president of the World Bank. That relationship back then was a catalyst to our thinking, well, what do we do? How can we do something that's significant as far as this issue of extreme poverty? And we think, well, maybe we could do it in a college. Fred Remus, who's a good friend here. Where are you, Fred? Over here. Fred and I have known each other since business school days. Fred had introduced me to Mark Wolfson, who's right here. This is after we had gotten to know each other well. Mark and I had gotten to know each other well. I was by his office. We were in conversation. I'm telling him what Dottie and I are thinking about doing and how do we really approach this issue of extreme poverty. And he pulled out a book written by Mike Spence that he had done this work for the World Bank. And then we started thinking more deeply about this issue and really, who did we want to walk with so that by walking together we could walk far. And then it became so obvious it was Stanford University. That's who we wanted to walk with. So we then turned to our friend Bill Meehan. Bill, thank you. And in a discussion with Garth Saloner, we found our dean, Garth, very responsive to our ideas, focusing on the business school. At that time, the notion was a center within the business school. And at a critical point, Garth is making a presentation to the President's Council, or whatever you call it. And that included the deans of the medical school, the engineering school, the law school. And they all said, no, we want in on this deal. And so at that point, it went from a center in the business school to an institute university-wide, and now known as the Stanford Institute for Innovation in Developing Economies. So the next step was Bill introduced us to Kim Yonker. Where are you, Kim? Right over here. Kim was working at that point with Bethany Coates. Are you over there, Bethany? Bethany was Dean Saloner's right hand, and they started working on the business plan. Together, they drew up the first business plan, and I will say there was version 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0, and I'm not sure we're through. I think there's another version of the business plan yet to come. So in August of 2012, we had an executive search to find our executive director for the Stanford Institute. And Trelance Addy, from this search, agreed to be Seed's executive director. And I feel like we struck gold. Oh my, did we strike gold. Trelance, where are you? Will you stand up with your wife? Where is your wife? Oh, hang on. This is Trelance Addy and his wonderful wife, Jo Addy. Trelance was born in Ghana. He got his undergraduate degree from Swarthmore College. He went on to get a master's, then a PhD at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in chemical engineering. Trelance has 14 patents to his name. Lance worked for Johnson & Johnson 20 years. Does he understand business? Absolutely. On his heart, does he want to take this job of solving the issue of extreme poverty? Absolutely. We are so blessed. And he's a humble person, I will say, but he's a get the job done kind of guy. He just puts it in gear. Less than 10 months, we opened our first Stanford Innovation Center in Accra, Ghana. This center in Western Africa, including Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, is really serving Western Africa. What we envision this year is going on and opening a second Stanford Innovation Center, which will be in Eastern Africa, serving Eastern Africa, probably in Henrietta's hometown of Nairobi. The plan subsequently is to open additional innovation centers under the SEED umbrella in Southeast Asia, South Africa, Latin America. And part of the vision is that there'll be a connection among these centers that shared information. It won't be just a north-south, but there's a south-south connection of people that are dealing with these issues and where we can be informed both ways. Dottie and I were in Accra in July for the opening. The first cohort, we had 29 businesses in the first cohort. And they range from vegetable growing to software engineering. The fundamental plan is to engage and support enterprising, promising entrepreneurs in the developing world who have established a business, and we want to help them scale their businesses, say from 50 employees to 5,000 employees. That's the vision. So we're on our way. We're looking to address, and this is probably the key, we're looking to address extreme poverty in the developing economies of the world by scaling businesses, thereby creating jobs. Dottie and I had the good fortune to spend some time with Secretary George Shultz, and as he was saying, there are trillions of dollars that have come down in the form of aid. And what you're talking about is building entrepreneurship from the bottom up, and got a very enthusiastic support from Secretary Shultz, and we feel that he has been significant in helping us promote this idea. At the beginning, there were several concerns that we had in SEED's leadership. Would the entrepreneurs open up about their problems and their opportunities? Would these entrepreneurs connect with each other, given the range of businesses and cultures involved? Well, when sitting in a high-energy class with Hao Lee, Hao is terrific, I add, as he was teaching about supply chain, we observed how one entrepreneur from Ghana, population 25, was teasing another entrepreneur from Nigeria, population 160, this kind of big brother, little brother relationship. And this one fellow from Ghana is teasing the guy from Nigeria, and it was so obvious that they were connecting. They had really connected. At dinner a month ago, Jim Patel, Jim, one of our star teachers at SEED, the founder of the Design for Extreme Affordability, told us that one of the entrepreneurs has invited all of the other 28 businesses to be at his daughter's wedding. Well, the implications of this is just as happened right here in Silicon Valley, that one generation of successful entrepreneurs is likely to reach out, invest in, and guide the next generation of entrepreneurs. Further implications of the model that has been created is that there's a cascade of relationships. As our regional centers, entrepreneurs, our staff, faculty, students, Stanford alumni coaches, let others know how they can be involved in making SEED a life-changing experience. Some people seem very dubious that successful Stanford MBA graduates, alums, would take 6 or 9 months out of their life to give back in this way, being coaches to a half a dozen entrepreneurs in the developing world. But should you ask Jan, Ed, Clinton, Bill, Kweku, you will catch their enthusiasm this coaching opportunity has meant to them. It's amazing. To me, this is just, no way would Dottie and I have been able to think about this ahead of time. But we just sent another new set of 5 coaches. I had breakfast the next day after meeting them. IBM executive, 25 years, lived in South Africa, basically managing IBM's activities in sub-Saharan Africa, and he's so excited to go. And I mean, how do you predict that? But I think we've hit a nerve that really has touched on people as an opportunity for these alums to go back and really make a difference in the world. Garth has already mentioned his mantra for the business school: change lives, change organizations, change the world. Dottie and I are more and more convinced that SEED is on a pathway to do just that. We thank all of the people engaged in this effort as we walk together. Well, now I'd like to point out something at your table. Maybe some of you have noticed. There's a dollar bill attached to your place card. And I would like to have you use that dollar to buy all the food that you're going to eat sometime next week in one day. $1. Dottie and I did it a week ago. It's hard. It's really hard. But hopefully when you do that, it will serve as a reminder of those way, way less fortunate than us, the extreme poor of the world. What I hope is it'll lead to some action. I would ask you to support SEED with all your best ideas. So, as I make my final conclusion, all I want to say is thank you, Stanford.
Together.
Thank you.